You are watching a completely different movie, my dude.
My brain is failing me. More vampires.
Welcome to Books and Brunch. I'm Noelle.
I'm Amber. We are doing another mini episode for Good Things to Read in October, and this one is all about vampires. One of the books is one that we have already done a full episode on.
This is The God of Endings by Jacqueline Holland. We just did this a couple episodes ago. This is an epic story about a female vampire, and it really takes a lot of the vampire traditional tropes and kind of puts it on its head. There's a lot of nuanced vampire lore that I think makes it really intriguing and really different than a lot of vampire books that we've read before.
I just bought that book. It was my mother-in-law's birthday. I just bought that for her. I can't wait to get her review. That literally is one of my favorite books. It goes through time, through countries. It has love. It has violence. It has just a ton of stuff.
It also, for history buffs out there, has like a ton of real history. Vampire panics. It's got 1940s France with the German invasion.
If you can't die and you've got Nazis invading this small town you live in, what are you going to do? So that's The God of Endings. That is one of my favorite books, not just vampire books, but just favorite books. This one, very different. This is a young adult novel. I read this series. It's I don't even know how many books are in this series, but it's a very long series. This is the first one. It's called Marked. And the whole series is called A House of Night. It's PC Cast and Kristen Cast. And what's cool is they are mother and daughter, the authors. It is YA. It is dark academia before dark academia was this big, huge trend. And it is a vampire school. I was seeing when this was copyrighted, 2007. So it's an older series. And my daughter started reading these when she was in high school because I had a bunch of them and she really liked them. But it's a vampire school where if you are born marked, you go to this school, and not everybody who's born marked will actually survive. It's a lighter YA book if you're wanting something vampires but not so intense.
So one of my favorite vampire books that I don't have because when I really, really love a book, I hand it off to somebody and I'm like, you have to read this. Let the Right One In, which is a Swedish horror book. And it's not necessarily, they don't use the word vampire, but if you've seen the film adaptation called Let Me In, there's a Swedish one and an English one. Both films are really good actually, but it's a child who was never turned or transformed. She was born a kind of monster who lives on eating flesh and blood of human beings.
Oh, that has Chloe
Moretz.
Chloe Moretz.
Yeah, she is kind of a vampire, definitely different lore than traditional vampire. There is a little boy in her apartment complex that she befriends, and he is an introvert. He's bullied at school. He has nobody. He really feels very fond of her and wants to be friends with her. He admires her strength, but he's also terrified of her. And what's cool about the book, though, that the movie doesn't go into, is there are characters who die in this town because she's feeding on them. And you learn about the people who are connected to them and their story.
The last one I have, which actually Noelle has read way more vampire books than I have. We discovered that the other day. This one inspired my shirt that Noelle sent me. It is Twilight. You have never read this.
I have read it. When I was in Iraq, I had nothing to do other than work 16-hour shifts, and a lot of them were guard duty. So I had a lot of reading time. And at the time, my sister I was in my 20s. My sister was like 14, and she was reading the Twilight novels, and she and I had no relationship because I left the house. I joined the military right after high school. She was just in like 6th grade or something. So I didn't know her. So I had started writing letters home to be like, hey, what are you interested in? What can we connect over? And she was like, well, I'm reading this book series by Stephanie Meyers. And I immediately ordered them, got them shipped to my barracks, and read them all probably in a couple weeks. And I was writing her these letters to be like, let's talk about this.
It's sad that war was what, drove you to read Twilight.
No, it was connecting with my sister.
Yeah. And so what's funny is these books are also nostalgic for me, and that's why I like the movie, I guess, especially because I was living in Washington State. I didn't really know anybody. I was married. I had a baby. And my neighbor across the street gave me her copy. And she's like, read this book. And so I read it. And I would, at night when I'd put her to bed, I would go get on my exercise bike and I would read this book while I was working out. And the movies do a really good job of the way that they made it look, that greenish blue where it's all rainy. That's how Washington looks. And then the soundtrack is so good. I don't know if I hadn't been in that time of my life where I'm dealing with postpartum, where I don't really know anybody, living in the location. I don't know if I'd feel the same way about them. Like, I get why some people don't like them, but to me, there's like a lot of nostalgia there.
No matter what you think about it, those books and films were a cultural phenomenon. Like, Stephanie Meyers made history. Like, that was a whole meme culturally. Like, it marks a moment. There are like every person, it's sort of like, you're like, I remember where I was when 9/11 happened. I remember where I was when the first Twilight movie came out. And my last vampire novel that I will say is, it's a little campy. It's kind of old, but it's Salem's Lot by Stephen King. If you haven't read it, it's so good. It's big, spooky in all the right ways. It's campy in all the right ways. It's a great mystery, but it's also one of those ones, like everyone tries to adapt Stephen King movies, right? No one has been able to do Salem's Lot any justice because it's too big. But if they did ever come out with a good adaptation of Salem's Lot, I would be super stoked.
I've never read any Stephen King. Would you say that would be like a good first read?
I don't know, because I know you and I know some of his later works that I actually think you would enjoy. They're like a little less horror campy 80s vibes and a little bit more serious novel vibes. Like, he wrote one very recently about all of these women, all women everywhere in the world, all on one day fall into a coma. And they're breathing and they're alive, but this spider web covers them, almost like cocoons them, and men are like, what is happening? And it's that men trying to figure out why this happened to all women everywhere. Will they ever wake up? What caused it? And how do they function in society? And he actually co-wrote it with his son. It's really good, and it's much newer, but I think that you would really like that book. But if you did want a fun, spooky season vampire story, Salem's Lot's great. I think we should all be allowed our guilty pleasures, and we shouldn't have to, like, qualify them or make excuses for them. Like, hey, I like this kind of lowbrow, not very great piece of art, but it makes me happy and it fills a void, and everyone should be like, heck yeah, yes.
I want everyone to think I'm really smart. Okay, so that is it for our vampire books, and we could go on and on about them, so we're going to limit ourselves. And if you go to our Instagram page, Books and Brunch Cast, we have our link tree, little link right there in the bio. If you click on that, it will have direct links to every platform.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Books
Bye.
and Brunch with Amber and Noelle.